Hi, I'm Travis with TBTRACING, and today we're going to show you how to rebuild a rear shock. It's a 2009 YZ450 KYB rear shock. You're going to need a regular hammer, a rubber mallet, a punch, some sort of old flat screwdriver, or one of these slick tools to knock the preload rings loose, flathead screwdriver, and a compression adjuster removing tool. First thing you want to do is make sure your shock's nice and clean. Put a little WD-40 up on the threads so when we knock that loose it's easy to spin. Let's go ahead and knock the jam nut loose. And spin the collar up. You can clamp this in the vise. Grab the spring and spin it, and it'll spin the collar. If it doesn't, you can use a spanner wrench or a pair of channel locks to spin the top collar. On the KYB shock, it's got a horseshoe shape cut out here on the retaining collar. Take the screwdriver and go in here and pop the rubber bumper down out of the way, and then this slides out past the shaft. Remove the shock spring. Next thing you want to do is open the rebound adjuster all the way open. And give it a push. That'll allow easier bleeding later in the process on the assembly. Take a flat punch. Knock that up. Also with your punch you can depress the Schrader valve and let the nitrogen out. Always cover this with your hand in case the bladder's been damaged. You don't want to spray yourself in the face with the oil. Shock over. Grab it in the vise with the body. Different shocks have different adjusters. You can purchase the special tool for your particular shock. So take and unscrew the compression adjuster. You just want to break it loose in the vise. And we're going to actually unscrew it a little ways. Then always point the shock away from yourself and continue unscrewing it, because if it's pressurized, you can have oil squirting everywhere, and you want it to squirt into your bucket or into your sink. And with a pair of pliers, wiggle out the compression adjuster. You can see there's some flats on here, easily grab onto, pull that out. Use some of our suspension cleaner. Rinse all this stuff off. Set that aside for reassembly. We want to take the shock, push on it. You want to be careful that you don't push too hard and slide the seal case down. Evacuate all the oil too fast and spray it all over the place. Now the flathead screwdriver, knock the seal case down and remove the clip. Your flathead screwdriver, go about a ½ inch back of the tip of the clip. Catch it, push it down. Make sure you get the seal case down far enough. Remove the clip. Now you want to clamp the shock clevis and the vise. And use your rubber hammer. Clamp the shock apart. Remove the shaft assembly from the body. Clean that. Then with the nitrogen reservoir, use a rubber hammer. That down. Remove the clip the same way. Take a pair of channel locks, twist out the bladder. The body's ready for cleaning. Physically inspect the bladder, the body, and the inner bore diameter. Make sure that there's no score marks or any shiny spots where the anodizings wore off the shock body. This one looks nice. It's nice and clean. So we'll set that aside for reassembly. Bladder, give that a bath. And you want to inspect the bladder for any damage, dimples. It's typical for them to have a little bit of wear mark on them from hitting the body. You really want to watch for tears around the top and the tip. If the seal leaks, the bladder will expand up into this port and it can actually tear the end of the bladder, in which case you'd want to replace the bladder. Take a slight dab of grease, grease the bladder, put it back into the body, reinstall the clip, pull the bladder up, channel locks to its original position, wipe off the extra grease, and a little bit of suspension wash. clean the shock shaft up, check out the valving. Now if your seal's leaking, you'll want to replace it. On a KYB shock, you can grind the end of the nut completely flat. On a Showa shock, you must grind around the perimeter of it so the center doesn't come out. You want to check out the video for valving for further instructions on how to do this. With a small Allen wrench, you can reach down, make sure you push the rebound needle down so it stays open so it can bleed the shock. Inspect the piston band for wear, tears, odd markings, metal, or any other debris. I'll go ahead and put a little bit of grease around the seal housing. Install that back into the shock. Your flat screwdriver, tap that back down. Install the clip. When you pull the shaft back out, make sure that the clip is fully engaged in the body and fully engaged in the seal case. Then you can tap the dust cover back in. Always use a rubber hammer so that you don't dent the shaft with a metal hammer. Tap the shock down to make sure the seal case is fully set, and then clamp the body on the seal case. Always use KYB K2C shock oil unless otherwise recommended by your owner's manual. So we're going to pour some fluid in here. The shock is very important that we get as much air as possible out of it. So we'll spend a good amount of time bleeding it and tapping on it and getting the air bubbles out. So you don't want to fill it completely full at this point. You want to have room to bleed it. So with your hand firmly over the compression adjuster hole, you'll stroke the shock several times. So then we'll fully compress the shock, remove it from the vise, give it a little tap. Tipping it around, make sure to get all the air worked up out of here. Give it a little pull, make sure the seal case is set down all the way. Clamp it back in the vise. Put a little paper towel in here. Then with your rubber mallet, tap this out. And with the shock fully extended, fully bled, top off the oil. Make sure it's completely full of fluid. And then watch for the air bubbles. wait until all the air's out before we charge the shock with gas. So once the shock's done bleeding, all the air bubbles have stopped. One more time, little tap, thumb over the hole. Make sure it's completely full of oil. And then with the bleeder hole towards the top, we're going to soak the compression adjuster down into the shock. A little extra oil is going to come up around it. Push that in. And tighten the compression adjuster back into the shock body. Now that the compression adjuster is bolted in, we're ready to charge it with nitrogen. Install the nitrogen apparatus. Charge the shock to your specified PSI. Disconnect your apparatus. Be sure to install your dust cover back over the Schrader valve, and then push the shock down and make sure there's no air in it. Set your clickers. You don't know where your clickers are supposed to be set at. Most of the shocks you can start with 12 and 12. Always refer to your owner's manual or your TBT spec sheet for your bike setting. Then you can reinstall the shock spring. Make sure that the rubber bumper's out of the way. If you've got a titanium Yamaha spring, make sure that your pieces are in properly. Almost all shock springs have paint marks on them. Paint mark always goes to the bottom of the shock, or the way we're working on it, up next to the retainer. Reinstall the retainer. Set down properly. Set the top collar to static, where it's just barely touching the spring. Put a pen mark on it. And for most shocks, you'll put 5 to 6 turns of preload on it. Just count your turns. Make sure to tighten the jam nut. And there you go. Your shock's ready to bolt back on the bike.